Welcome, Chatham, to the meeting of the Chatham Select Board of November 14, 2023, and when we get to that portion of the agenda, will become a joint meeting of the Select Board and the Chatham Board of Health. This meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify the chair. Seeing none, I will proceed with the governor's notice. Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31, 2025. This meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 203-386-491, #, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, now Xfinity Channel 8 and 1070, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. Let me start with a roll call of our board here. Select Board Member Nicastro.
Present.
Select Board Member Davis.
Present.
Select Board Member Dykins.
Present.
And Select Board Member Shell is present. For those of you who were confused, I'm not Corey Metters. He managed to organize his son, who is co-captain of the Monomoy Sharks soccer team, to be participating tonight in the Final Four of the State Division IV Boys Soccer Championship. So we wish them well. Actually, Monomoy is doing very well. They're also, tomorrow night, they'll be participating in the Final Four. The girls will be participating in the Final Four in field hockey. So good luck to all of them. Let me just quickly run through our agenda for the evening. We'll start with the minutes of our meeting on November 7th. Our town manager will introduce our new Director of Natural Resources, Mr. Berman. We'll then have public announcements and agenda item requests. We'll then have a public hearing on traffic signs. We will then have public comments on the business agenda. With one exception, the public will be invited to make comments in parallel with item D, which is the joint meeting with the Board of Health concerning the revisions of the Town of Chatham nitrogen loading regulation. The first order of the business agenda will be considering applications for one-day special alcohol permits. Next will be a consideration of the extension of seasonal liquor licenses, for which we have, I think, 5 applications. Next will be a presentation from Rick Nye on the Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge update. And then, as mentioned, the joint meeting will convene a joint meeting with the Board of Health. And then we will briefly consider the calendar year 2024, fiscal year 2025 goal setting workshop on December 5, 2023, process and objectives. And finally, we have appointments and reappointments for the Independence Day Parade Committee, the Council on Aging Board of Directors, which I will propose to defer, the Cultural Council, the Barnstable County Human Rights Advisory Committee, and the Community Preservation Committee. With that, I will entertain a motion on the minutes of November 7.
So moved.
Yep. Second.
Any corrections or amendments? Mr. Nacastro?
I don't have it.
No, I'm calling a vote.
Aye.
I'm sorry, do we have a motion? Yes, yeah.
Aye.
We have an aye. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Jill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very pleased and excited to introduce our new Director of Natural Resources, Greg Berman. Greg has been a longstanding collaborator with the town's Natural Resources Department, including shellfishing, conservation, and coastal resiliency. And he's been very involved in our community's climate change, as well as our coastal resiliency community and planning. So at this point, I want to turn this over to Greg to further introduce yourself. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jill. And I've had the pleasure of meeting a couple of you online. This is nice to be able to see you in person and meet the rest of you. So, as Jill mentioned, I've been working in the area for quite some time. For the last 14 years, I've been working at Barnstable County down at Woods Oceanographic Institution with the Sea Grant program, working a lot with coastal resilience, climate change, sea level rise, erosion, all aspects that are highly affecting Chatham currently and in the future. That was one of the reasons, it really brought me to Chatham, is it's going to be experiencing a lot of challenges in the future, and I'd love to be a part of that. I think there's help that I can provide, and that with challenges, there's opportunities. And working with the great staff that's already, in the department, the division leaders I've worked with in the past and I've just met over the last couple of days, seem very experienced, have very robust programs. Some of us just not going to be getting in their way, but I'm hoping to be able to enhance their programs where I can.
Welcome, thank you very much. I'm sure people have been asking you about what size your feet are. You have some big shoes to fill, but we will welcome you and we'll do everything we can to get you involved and up and running. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from the board?
I'm just very excited to have Greg here in Chatham. Thank you.
Yeah, as am I. Welcome. You have some challenge. We all have challenges ahead of us, and you're going to have some fun here. Greg, welcome.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. The next item on the agenda is public announcements and agenda item requests. Public announcements, Mr. Nacastro?
Well, I have an agenda item request per se.
Okay, let's get the announcements out of the way. Does any announcements on the board? I don't see any in the audience here. Anybody online, Jill?
No. Yes,
Okay.
people are online, but there's no one wishing to make an announcement.
Thank you. And then agenda item requests.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, essentially to Kathy and Jill. Last night, Chairman Metters indicated that he would be placing on the agenda for our next meeting, which is on the 28th, a consideration of possible expansion of the Council on Aging Board. In that connection, I'd like to make sure that, and I think it would be helpful, if we have in the meeting materials package the following items, their documents. First of all, the July 25th minutes of the Select Board, specifically page 6, which contains a vote of this board referring that issue back to the Council on Aging for a recommendation, and a memo dated July 26, 2023 from our executive assistant to the chair of the Council on Aging on that topic, and I would anticipate that there would be a report back from that board, which is going to meet on the 20th, and I'd like that, if and when it comes, to be included in the materials in that meeting package that are posted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Fine. Anything else from,
Yes.
yeah, Mr. Dykens?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, just an agenda item request to revisit the manner in which we report out testing results for our water tests during the summertime months especially. I just asked Jill and Judith to see what we can do to streamline the reporting out of tests when we get them. I've had a couple citizens raise the issue with me, and I just want to make sure we get it baked. Thanks.
Anything else? Are there any requests online?
No.
Okay. Our next item is a public hearing on traffic signs, et cetera. I'm pleased to be able to pass the request on to my friend, Mr. Dykens, to read the public announcement of the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shell. The Chatham Select Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, November 14th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. in the large meeting room at the Town Office Annex 261 George Ryder Road to consider the placement of new traffic signs, new stop signs, and stop bars. Forest Beach Road extension at the intersection with Woodland Road. Forest Beach Road extension at the intersection with Forest Beach Road. The signs are of standard size and style and recommended to the board by the Traffic Safety Committee. New safe bicycle passing signs, Crowell Road, the east side near Chatham Drama Guild, Old Queen Anne Road, just west of Skyline Drive, Ridgevale Road, west side and wooded area, Forest Beach Road, west side and vicinity of number 78, Cedar Street, west side and vicinity of Crosswalk, Cockle Cove Road, west side and vicinity of number 30, Champlain Road, west side of Windy Hill Road, Stage Harbor Road across from Cedar Swamp Road, Bridge Street, east side and vicinity of Conservation Pull-Off, Main Street, east side and vicinity of Hallway Street, Main Street, downtown and vicinity of Eldridge Garage Parking Area, Shore Road, east side and vicinity of Wilkie Way, Barcliff Avenue, north side and vicinity of Shore Road, Barcliff Avenue, south side and vicinity of Tipcart Drive, Pleasant Street, west side and vicinity of number 68. The signs are 24 inches by 30 inches and are required by the new Vulnerable Road Users Law. All interested parties are encouraged to participate. Signed, Chatham Select Board.
Thank you. And I think we have Lieutenant Goddard and DPW Director Faley to present. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm just presenting this first item here, which is the 2 stop signs in South Chatham. This is part of a larger review that the Traffic Safety Committee has undertaken of the South Chatham neighborhood. As part of it, we're recommending these 2 stop signs be installed. The first one being on Forest Beach Road Extension with the intersection of Forest Beach Road. And the second one being on Forest Beach Road Extension as it comes out onto Woodland Way. Currently, there's no traffic control devices at either of those intersections. The committee's concern is that without that, vehicles, especially coming out of Forest Beach Extension on Woodland, might not stop or yield to the oncoming vehicles coming down Woodland. So they are recommending the installation of these 2 stop signs plus the stop bars.
Okay, are there any comments from the public, either in person or online? I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Faley.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. So on April 1st, 2023, Massachusetts passed a vulnerable road users law. It's really to address traffic fatalities, primarily due to pedestrians and bicyclists on the side of the road. Mass DOT developed a new sign. It's shown in the upper right-hand corner. Motorists give 4 feet to pass with a bicycle symbol. The bicycle symbol is not just the only vulnerable road user represented, but it's probably the most common, vulnerable person or occupant on the side of the road. So we tried to not overload the side of the road with too many signs. We worked through the Bikeways Committee, the Traffic and Safety Committee. We came up with 15 locations that seemed like logical choices. And we'd just like to get your approval to install those signs. We did work with DOT to sign an MOA, and the signs are free of charge if we maintain them for 2 years.
Thank you. Comments from the public, either here or online? I'm sorry, yes, please. Could you, excuse me, you'll need to go to the podium and announce yourself, if you would, please.
I could just ask a quick question. Hi, I'm Carol Gordon from South Chatham. I was just wondering if your signs will replace any other existing signs? Or if they will be added to, or if they'll be added to?
So no, we are not replacing any of the existing bikeway signs. These are all in addition to existing signs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other yes, ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Barbara Bora, and I live at 45 Forest Beach Road Extension. I just had a question on the South Chatham signs on Forest Beach Road. Was there a consideration to put one at Woodland and Forest Beach Extension?
Yes, there was. The discussion involved traffic volume, and there was higher volume anticipated coming down Woodland Road, or excuse me, Woodland Way going towards Forest Beach Road, across Forest Beach Extension. So that's why the decision was to put it on Forest Beach Extension where it is now, where it's requested.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Anything online? I think, Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just addressing the, Lieutenant, the recommendation of the Traffic Safety Committee. So as I'm looking at that map, well, it's off the screen now, but, so there is a sign that's going, looks like on Forest Beach Road itself?
So Forest Beach Road Extension comes up from the south, and Woodland Way actually stops right where Forest Beach Road Extension comes out, and then Forest Beach takes the right. So the first sign would be there on Forest Beach Extension at that intersection. The second one would be on Forest Beach Road at the Forest Beach Extension.
Okay. We did receive a communication from a resident within the last week or two. I think it was forwarded to the Traffic Safety Committee by the town manager. I know that's not the subject of this hearing, but is the committee looking into that, going to address that request?
There's a lot of different issues that we're looking at throughout that whole neighborhood, Pleasant
Okay.
Street, Forest Beach, all the way through out to Cockle Cove and Ridgevale.
Okay. Thank you, Lieutenant. And then on the other item, the signage, Rob, so there was an MOA that has been signed with the between the town and the Department of Transportation?
Yes, it has been signed. There wasn't a lot of wiggle room. Basically, they gave us several weeks to sign it, so we had to get that approval first. We have not received the signs yet, so we can always back out of the agreement if the board doesn't vote in approval.
Okay. And I haven't read the statute, but I'm reading between the lines here. The signs are not legally obligated. It's the 4-foot space that's required by the statute, right, by the motorist.
That's correct. It's just the sign is there as an informational purpose to really inform motorists of the new law.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, I move, unless
If
there are
I
other
may,
comments.
there's one other question here, Mr. Dykens.
Just one quick question. Does the sign look like motorists give 4 feet to pass? Is that the sign?
That's the template for the sign, yes.
Yeah, it's 24 by 30.
Correct.
Right, thanks.
Although it's bigger on higher speed limit roads, is that not right?
That's true, but we opted to stay with the smaller sign since most of Chatham's roads are lower speed.
Okay, okay. I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take them one by one. I'll move first to approve the recommendation of the Traffic Safety Committee as presented by Lieutenant Goddard relative to the stop signs for Forest Beach Road Extension and Woodland Road.
Second.
Any further discussion? I'll call for a vote. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And the chair says aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the signage recommendation as presented by the Public Works Director for the various streets enunciated.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we next go to our, public comments on the business agenda, with the exception of item D, which is the joint meeting with the Board of Health. And just quickly, the business agenda includes applications for one-day special alcohol permits, an extension of seasonal liquor licenses, report on the Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge, the select board process and goal setting and objectives, appointments and reappointments, and that concludes the business agenda. Any comments from the public on any of those? Any online? Okay. So we will go then to the item A, which is the applications for one-day special permits for wine and malt beverages. Whom do we have presenting? Shauna, thank you.
Sure, good evening. I don't see the applicant online, but these are for 4 Thursday evening after-hour shopping events that Chatham Clothing Bar would like to host. I believe they're marketing it towards sort of a men's night. So 4 different applications, 4 different one-days, 2 different managers, which is why they're listed separately. The November 16th would be for Lori Gilmore to act as the responsible manager. The other 3 dates would be Emma Carroll.
We have Lori
Now
Gilmore.
we have somebody online.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, sorry, my computer wasn't working, but I think I'm good now.
So do you want to make any further comments to what Shauna presented with respect to your application?
I think that covered it. We are doing a series of men's shopping nights. There's 4 dates that are listed there. The time is actually 5 to 7 for the first 3, and we were going to stay open a little later till 8 for the last one. We are just going to offer some food and drink. As far as the drinks, they'd be small 5-ounce cups that we pour and serve ourselves, so we control. And that's really it.
Any questions, Dean? Oh, so Jeff, sorry.
No, I'm going to make a motion.
I will accept the motion.
Okay, I move to grant one-day special permits for wine and malt beverages only for the Chatham Clothing Bar, 534 Main Street on November 30th, 2023, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. 534 Main Street, Emma Carroll as responsible manager. November 16th, from 5 to 7 at 534 Main Street, Lori Gilmore as responsible manager. December 14th, from 5 to 7 at 534 Main Street, Emma Carroll as responsible manager. And December 21st, 2023, from 5 to 8 p.m. at 534 Main Street, Emma Carroll as responsible manager.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Thank you very much. And Shauna, I think, are you presenting the extensions as well of seasonal liquor license?
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
this is a regular annual request from seasonal license holders. The Pates is requesting Chatham Cut, Bistro, and Captain's Table. These are all, we've extended those for years. New this year is Chatham Sunrise Cafe, which is a request and extension to December 31st. They were just granted their seasonal license earlier this year, so this is their first year seeking an extension.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, Mr. Nacastro?
I'm just going to offer a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the one thing I noted is, and I'm going to out-technical you here, Dean. I think the bistro on Main should include the name Vieira to be technically correct, but I will invite
Should include what?
the name Vieira.
Okay.
Bistro Vieira on Main.
Okay.
Welcome the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the requested extensions of seasonal liquor licenses for the following establishments: Pace Restaurant through January 15th, 2024, the Chatham Cut through January 15, 2024, Bistro Vieira on Main through January 15, 2024, Captain's Table through December 31, 2023, Chatham Sunrise Cafe through December 31, 2023.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And the chair says aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. The next item on the agenda is the Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge update from Mr. Rick Nye. Welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, board members, for inviting me. This is not changing. I was going to try to get the others. There we go. Perfect. That's probably a better slide to start with. I brought with me today Brad Wynn and Liana D'Annunzio. They're both from an organization called Monomoy. They do a lot of bird surveys out there. They've been studying birds for about 50 years in the area, so they know them better than I. I've been at Monomoy for 2.5 years. Hopefully, I know she's on her way. She had to attend a town meeting in Sudbury, but Stephanie Coach, who has been with the Fish and Wildlife Service, she did her PhD thesis on this very topic that we're going to discuss today. And so hopefully she arrives soon. I know on the agenda it's an update, but I know we're also primarily here to talk about the closure areas and how that affects the shell fishing on Monomoy. I think probably it is important to do a bit of an update just so we can kind of lead into that. I'm happy to provide answers on pretty much any topic that have been a concern for what happens out there on the refuge. Sorry. So the main thing, just to kind of review what the refuge is and what it's for, it was established to be an inviolate sanctuary for migratory birds. Pretty simple, straightforward on that. Today, we're the site for, we have one federally listed species, for our federally endangered species, the roseate tern. We have, and this is birds. We have 2 federally threatened bird species, piping plover and rufo red knot. We also have 5 birds that are listed by the state of Massachusetts, and they designate Monomoy as a primary habitat for that. And then there's another 20 migratory birds that rely on Monomoy as a stopover site for resting and foraging while they migrate up and down the Atlantic coast, Atlantic flyway. Overall, we have documented throughout our history over 350 species of birds on the refuge, which is it's a really big number. If you're not familiar with places, when people ask me what's special about it, we don't necessarily have anything that no one else has, but we have a lot of everything and a lot of diversity. It's the primary spot and arguably one of the most important places for birds in the Northeast. On a larger scale, just to kind of talk about the staffing a little bit, we've had a lot of changes over the last 4 seasons. We've gone from having just 1 person with no interns to last year having 2 staff and 9 interns. We probably peaked looking at our forecast for our budget with that kind of staffing. Historically, like just 12 years ago, our refuge complex, which includes 8 refuges between Eastern Mass and Cape Cod and the islands, used to have 20 people. Right now, we're down to 8 for that whole complex. So we're doing what we can. When we talk about on a larger scale, or, just an update on how we are doing right now, specific to some of those species I mentioned. The roseate terns right now are trending upwards. I wouldn't say it's statistically significant, but right now we have 40 pairs this past year, like 38 last year, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily a sure trend upward, but piping plovers don't show really much change. They vary. I could say they have 40 pairs, but it's plus or minus 10 over the last 5 years. So I wouldn't say there's a trend there. Common terns and least terns are kind of trending up, but it's hard to say. But we have a lot of common terns. We have 19,000 pairs of common terns and 600 pairs of least terns, which is quite remarkable. I think we're probably the #1 site for those birds in our region. And then I'll steal a little bit of Manomet's thunder. In August, they did a survey across 115 sites up and down the whole coast of Massachusetts to count birds, and Monomoy accounted for 32% of all the birds that were counted during that survey. So on a larger scale, I mean, that kind of sounds like Monomoy's doing all right. But if you look at how the rest of the birds are doing, most of them are not doing well. A lot of birds, maybe 50% of the species, are down. And that raises Monomoy's profile. It raises our importance to do as much as we can if we're going to be the primary site for a lot of these birds. And there is increasing pressure to do more for the shorebirds. I don't know if you saw about a month ago. I'll skip that for a minute. Sorry. So regarding management decisions, everything we've done, everything we do, it's all been as we said we would, in the comprehensive conservation plan. I know that came out in 2016. Those are supposed to last 15 years. I know there was a lot of discussion about it. But everything we've done in there is pretty much as we said we did, to the extent that we could. So maybe we haven't done everything, but we've not exceeded anything that we put in there. There's a couple parts. In the packet, I provided the section that dealt with shorebirds. I neglected to put in the part about the compatibility determination, but I can provide that. But the determination kind of goes into a little more detail about this, shellfishing specifically, and how we can mitigate for any impacts from that, and what the stipulations are to continue it. Let's see. I would also just say, shellfishing has been compatible with the refuge use. I think the question is just where it's okay to do it for the shorebirds. In that image, that's a current May. I think that was an image that was taken in May that kind of just shows currently where the islands are and where all the sandbars are. Maybe we can just go to the other image. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, okay, so that one's got the labels on it. So you can kind of see North Monomoy, Mini Moy, and South Monomoy. On there, we drew the circles with pen where where shellfishing overlaps with where we have closure areas for the shorebirds. I think that's the main thing I wanted to present. I don't know if it's best to go into questions or if anyone else has something they want to bring up.
Yeah, if you want to say something, please go ahead and say something. Otherwise, we have at least one question here on the board.
Hi, thank you. My name is Brad Wen. I'm the Vice President of Manomet for Resilient Habitats. Manomet is a nonprofit research and conservation organization based in Plymouth. And our early biologists in the 70s started doing surveys on Monomoy as well as other places throughout the Western Hemisphere, actually. And I just wanted to shed a little bit of light on the importance of the site to, as Rick mentioned, a group of birds that are rapidly declining. There are multiple shorebirds. We just published a paper in end of 2022 that shows some species that used to be much more common here are declining in the 80 or even 90% range over the last 30 years or so. So we're in a fairly dire straits with many species, and Monomoy plays a significant role in the long-term conservation of those birds. I wanted to shed a little bit of light again on the significance of Monomoy, not just in Massachusetts or even New England, but the connectivity with this particular very valuable habitat for these long-distance migrant birds that come as far as Alaska and Arctic Canada and stage here on the way south. Staging is a stopover time period when they forage for a month or so and gain enough weight to migrate from Monomoy and other spots in Massachusetts all the way down into the tropics and well below into South America from here. And likewise, on the way north, Monomoy is a stopover site in spring migration for birds coming up, something called a red knot, which is one of the species that Rick mentioned is listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, stops off here and feeds on horseshoe crab eggs on Monomoy Refuge in the springtime. These birds are overwintering in places as far as Tierra del Fuego in southern South America, Chile, and Argentina. So Monomoy and other spots like it are designated as Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network sites. And this one was designated in 1999 for its importance regionally for shorebirds stopping over here. The intertidal zone provides the food resources. The area between high and low water provides all of the resources that these birds use and feed on in their migration stopover periods. It's invertebrates that live in the soils and sands that are flooded twice a day. So the area is particularly, as you can tell, the shoaling areas there on the refuge are particularly important for birds feeding in the intertidal zone, and then they roost in the sandy areas all the way up into the dunes and the ocean-facing beaches as well. So that's really all I wanted to say this evening, but thank you for your time, and I'll be here for any questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Davis?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome, Rick. Can I call you Rick? Our apologies for not having you come sooner and talk with us. You've been with the Refuge for a couple of years, and we haven't reached out, but I appreciate you here tonight. A couple of things have come up, and I appreciate your report on the status of the birds and the importance of Monomoy and what's going on. It's really fascinating to be down when, you see all the birds starting to migrate in the spring, and it's an amazing experience to be part of that. Claiming on Monomoy when I was younger, it was always a neat kind of thing to be running the boat down there and being with the birds. What I do have, which brought to our attention that we hadn't had an update from you, was some concerns on some signage that has shown up in the last couple of years in the intertidal area that have never been there before, to my knowledge. And I know that you have met with our Shellfish Advisory Committee and our Shellfish Constable, who are here tonight, to Constable Gagney and Chair Davis, no relation to me. I always have to say that. Anyway, and you've consequently you've heard the concerns of the Shellfish Advisory Committee as to why all of a sudden these signs have shown up in an area of where the resource is and the product is for a small amount of guys that are gathering. I saw in the notes of the meeting that you have agreed to work together to keep communications open. But I guess one of the things that I had questions about was, these signs were placed last year and they were in the intertidal area, and now this year they're even further into the area. And the biggest question is why? Why now?
Why now? I think it's the increasing pressure to protect more area for the shorebirds, and and they're moving. The tern colony, which is in the, I don't know if you can see, oh, I got a pointer, don't I? Here we go. I don't know if this shows up online, but this sandy area, so this is South Monomoy Island, and then that sandy area is the tern colony. But the terns are spreading out from there, and then of course the bird's nest, you know, some of them nest all on the shore, some of them nest in this grassy area. So they've moved south a little bit. So that's part of it. They move around. They don't always pick the exact same spot. We're pushing it out further because they are, well, part of it is, it's not so much wine now, like something changed, right, you know, like an acute change. It was more like we said we were going to do this and we hadn't had the staff to do it. And we're getting further, you know, we're getting a little more capacity last year to get the signs where they probably should have been for a while. They just hadn't been there. The other thing we started doing was the buoys, because it's a very time-consuming thing to put out all those metal post signs. And so we thought maybe we could do the buoys because it's easier to deploy them and remove them. And but you know, those end up being a little further out. But it's all within the 150 meters that we said we would. So it's not really a change. Maybe we did more than we've done recently, but it's not any different than we said we were going to do.
From my perspective, and probably the perspective of the Shellfish community in the town of Chatham, you know, we've had this municipal agreement together, this MOU?
MOU.
Yeah, MOU, over the last couple of years, where we've come to an understanding about our roles. And the Shellfish community that actually goes down to Monomoy is extremely small now. It used to be pretty big back in the 90s. But this is a considerably small group of people. And this particular area is very key to their shellfishing activity. And so I was wondering why in this particular area could it be and not in another area that has the same sort of opportunity for the birds, and that we are maintaining this sort of, relationship with you that is an understanding that we can all work together, knowing that even in the report, it states that, shellfish activity actually has a positive influence on some of those species, and it does say the ruddy turnstone and the American oyster catcher, and that even in the report it says that the presence of shellfishermen does not appear to affect the density or the other species of birds that they've been monitored. So to tell the folks that they can't go in here now, even though they've had this understanding that and respect for the birds. I mean, you don't see dogs down there anymore, and people are, have a better understanding through the last few years. I mean, we've worked historically since the 60s on this. I just have a big question as to why this small area where it is an important resource for the shellfish community.
Yeah, I think it's mostly because of where we saw the birds last year. I mean, we got just a small group of people that put the signs out. We see them moving south. We don't have the staffing to, move the signs around with that kind of finesse. Based on where I saw a nest last week, it's more like I saw them moving south. We needed to move the signs further south. Regarding the report, it's not the only report. We have other research that shows 158 meters causes other species of birds to disperse and disturb them. And we have a lot of species of birds that react differently to human presence. I think also part of it, I mean, I experienced this, I know different coast, but I previously worked at a refuge in a more urban area, and we experienced birds across from a very popular beach could tolerate 20 feet, whereas in the more secluded refuge that was on a Navy base, they couldn't tolerate 80 feet, and they were just 2 miles apart. So you have some variation even at a small scale of what birds can be tolerant of human presence. So I understand the oyster catchers seem to, I think that report showed that they come in not long after the soil's been turned over. But then, I have another report that says birds, other species of birds weren't tolerant at all out to 100, I think it was 158 or 168 meters. But we drew the line at 150.
So does that mean that you're changing the comprehensive conservation plan?
Nope. No, it's still the same. It says in there, I think the excerpt I provided does talk about, initially our plan was to do 50, but if that's not working, move it to 100. And if that wasn't working, we'd go out as far as 150. So there's some signs that are not 150 meters out, others are.
Okay. I'm going to express my deep concern to our board on this issue. We've been working on Monomoy and the compatibility of our shell fishermen and the refuge for decades. And this is a bit of a surprise for all of us. And I want to express my deep concern over this, and hopefully we can continue a dialogue to open up a better understanding about this. But I think that we need to have another meeting to sort of discuss what is some of the things that are of deep concern and send it up the chain.
Mike? Yeah, I appreciate Monomoy. I worked down there. We had a vibrant sea clam industry down there, a fishery down there in the mid-'80s that was really revitalized the fishermen in the town, and the fishermen have really relied on Monomoy for shell fishing, for soft-shell clams in particular. And I recollect, and I have to go back and look at it and do it for this meeting, but I'd like to go back and look at the comprehensive plan, because I recollect that when changes were to be made, we were to sit down and talk about them. That's what I remember. Now, I'd have to go back and see if that's codified, and that language is codified in the management plan, but that's how I recall. We worked out a management plan with the National Wildlife Service for years, back and forth. We had Congress involved, et cetera. So I would hate to see what has been a remarkably congenial relationship degrade. And it's difficult for us to turn around and tell our fishermen that they can no longer shellfish there. And certain, I guess, those red areas, you close them from March and through October. Well, that's the height of the summer. That's when folks need to make a living. So we've got a real conflict, if you will, between historical use and our birds. And don't get me wrong, I adore the birds, and I'm not being facetious one iota. I understand how important the Monomoy flyway is to the bird world. I understand that the plethora of species we have there, and the variety and the need to have a Monomoy along the Northeast Flyway is critical. We get it. We've got it all along. But somehow we got to figure out how we can still get our shellfishers down there to dig clams on the low tide. I just can't imagine it's that disruptive. And I have to go back and look at the management plan, but I believe we worked it out so that if there were changes to be made to where we can shellfish, that we were supposed to discuss them before those changes were made. And Shireen, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I recollect.
That's why I want to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, there is a stipulation in the compatibility determination, and we do this. I mean, there's an annual meeting that I have with the Shellfish Constable.
Okay.
And so, I mean, we meet at, maybe that meeting has been more or less just a report out rather than a discussion. But, so we already have a standing meeting.
Okay.
So, that might be the next vehicle by which we have a further discussion about it. But, and I think it would be changes from what was written in the plan, as the way I took it. I mean, so we had already spelled out things we planned to do. And then in the MOU, it discussed who manages shellfishing. And then it outlines where we disagree on the western boundary. It doesn't really go much deeper than that.
Yeah, so I think there's a further conversation to be had, to be honest with you. I mean, the shoreline changes constantly, especially on the west side, changes constantly. And maybe migratory patterns change constantly, so maybe we need to change once in a while too. So I think it's worthy of a further conversation, and I really think that we need to sit down and kind of go through it. It's too important a fishery. And again, we hashed this out for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure we were supposed to get notified when changes were made.
I'm not sure whether the constable has any questions or statements or anything at this time.
Hi, good evening. Renee Gagnon, Shellfish Constable. I don't particularly have any questions. I just think that this is an opportunity for us to actually have a little better communication between us and the refuge. We've always had a very good relationship with the refuge and the refuge managers. I just think that it provides an opportunity for more discussion and also an opportunity to reiterate some of the science that the town has expended its money to show that the harvesters within that intertidal flats actually encourage the foraging of the birds, and maybe we can just go and dive into that research a little more and have a little more open discussion. Thank you.
Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wonder, in order to pursue the suggestions for increased communication, maybe we could establish if the refuge is agreeable, a formal dialogue with perhaps Board Member Davis, the chair of the Shellfish Committee, and our constable with your office, and you could establish when you might want to meet, but would you be agreeable to something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I would propose
Okay.
that to the board. I mean, offer that as a motion.
Yeah, you can make that as a motion. And I welcome the motion. I was going to ask whether we wanted, and this would be directed to you, Shireen, at least a general notion of a timetable when this would come back to us to get a little bit of a progress report, to have a sense that there is some progress.
I think that's part of the process. I don't think we can put a date down on it until we can establish, like, I'm very appreciative of Dean making this motion, and I'm gonna support it. And I think that once we have an initial conversation and we're engaged, then we could probably put this on the agenda, but not have a date specific until we sort of have something to report out. And Mr. Nye, I really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to speaking with you more.
Okay. Sure.
Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. I think that's a
All
great
right, then
idea.
go ahead, Dean.
So I move that the board designate Board Member Davis, the chair of the Shellfish Advisory Committee, if that person is willing to undertake it, and our Shellfish Constable to engage in a periodic dialogue with the wildlife, the refuge on this topic, and report back to the board.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nye. Appreciate it. So the next item on the agenda is the joint meeting with the Board of Health. I would invite the members of the Board of Health, whom I see in the audience, to come up and join us on the dais. And while you're doing that, I would propose that we, well, let them get settled, and then I will make my comments and my introduction. So I'm just very, very briefly, and I'm mostly repeating what I've heard, so don't shoot the messenger. It's my understanding that there has been considerable discussion and perhaps a little concern and a good deal of community attention on the amendments to the nitrogen loading bylaw that were enacted, I think, in July, effective August 1. And they've also been the subject of a couple of hearings in front of the Board of Health, which led to an invitation on our part to ask the Board of Health to join us, maybe make a sort of a general presentation commentary regarding the evolution of that amendment, and then offer the public an opportunity to make comments if they wish. And I'll note that there's a microphone here in the middle aisle as well as the podium. You can use either. And of course, the board will have its questions and can chime in. So with that, Chairman Hanson, I would invite you to convene your meeting and make the comments that you would like to make in response to that. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay, Noble Hanson, first we can establish a quorum of the Board of Health, and when I call your name, if you can say present. Dick Edwards? Present. Harold Boyce? Present. Carol Gordon?
Present.
Noble Hanson, I'm present. Two of our regular members, John Beckley and Ron Broman, were not able to attend tonight, maybe because of the odd time.
And if I may, Judy Giorgio is also here.
Yes, Judy's here.
Thank you.
And she attends all our meetings. And I just, I would say, we haven't had a lot of feedback, actually. We've had, I think, 2 complaints of people that have 2-bedroom homes and want to add a 3rd bedroom. But other than that, we actually haven't had a lot of feedback. We haven't had any feedback from the board prior to this meeting. But as I understand it, what you wanted was a timeline of our process, kind of our process that brought us to here, and what we actually did. And Judy has put together for you a summary of the timeline, our meetings, public hearing. Basically, it was our normal process. And then some new language to the nitrogen loading regulations. And that's in your packet. But I think what I might do to start would be to ask Judy to just go over the summary that she made for the packet and for the select board that gives the timeline of what we actually did, the change in the language to the nitrogen loading, and just put it in context for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. As you know, the Board of Health has had nitrogen loading regulations on the books since, I think, 2004. The regulation was 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet of lot area. And there was a section of the regulation that basically stated that they were allowed to request an additional bedroom over that amount if they added an IA technology. This spring, leading up to the springtime, we started to get a lot of requests for extra bedrooms on undersized lots. 4 bedrooms on a 20,000 square foot lot requesting a 5th, three on a 20,000 requesting a 4th, those types of things. And the board number allowed by section 5.1 and 5.2 with the use of an IA nitrogen reducing technology on-site subsurface sewage disposal system, providing that said lot is not in a nitrogen-sensitive area. That's a contribution to a well area. Basically, it stopped there. I just added one line that said existing properties that already exceed the requirements of section 5.1 and 5.2 will not be allowed the extra bedroom. So the change basically says that if you have a 3-bedroom house on a 20,000 square foot lot, you're already exceeding the nitrogen loading regulation and you would not be allowed a 4th. If you have a 3-bedroom house on a 30,000 square foot lot, you would be allowed a 4th if you request a variance from the Board of Health and put in an IA septic system. That was the basic change. So we are still allowing an extra bedroom upon request if they aren't already maxed out by the language of the nitrogen loading regulation. This felt like it was more in spirit with the intent of the regulation as it was written. We did our normal hearing process. We had an informative discussion between the board members, and then we had a public hearing that was published twice in the Chronicle. We had very little attendance. I think there were 2 people in the audience and only one person spoke up at the public hearing. So the board felt, confident to go forward with the regulations. and they went into effect August 1st. Since then, we've had a few calls at the health department, few questions from concerned engineers. But beyond that, I haven't really had a ton of feedback until this came up with the discussion with you.
Good, thank you, Judy. Yeah, I just emphasize a couple things. In the nitrogen loading regulation, in the pertinent part, it says the residential application the board may allow. So it's not shall allow, it's may allow, it's up to the discretion of the board. One additional bedroom, this is going from Title V to IA technology, over the number allowed by sections 5.1 or 5.2. So it refers back to a previous section which lays out what Judy talked about, one bedroom per 10,000 square foot of lot size is what you get by right. So if it's 40,000 square feet, it's 4 bedroom. What happened for us and over time was there was a grandfathered thing where, for example, and don't hold me to this exactly, this is from my memory, you know, a house in the old village, it may be on less than 20,000 square feet, but it may have 4 or 5 bedrooms because when these nitrogen loading regulations were put in 2005, there were homes that had already been granted those bedrooms and they were kind of grandfathered. Now, the regulations don't talk about grandfathering at all. Our problem was what we were seeing more and more of were this home, as the example I cite, in the old village, less than 20,000 square foot, might have 4 or 5 bedrooms, and then if they go from Title V to IA, they can get 1 extra bedroom. That just seemed like a lot, a bit much for us, and that's, I think, is where this thing came up. And I think Judy put together this paragraph, which I think puts the overall thing in perspective, and I'll just read it. The Board of Health agreed that the increasing number of bedroom addition requests, as well as short-term rentals over the past 3 years, has negative impacts leading to stress on the town's water and sewer infrastructure, water quality, water in general, and the quality of life in residential neighborhoods. The changes proposed make the application of the regulations and the variance process more in line with the original intent and spirit of the regulation as we saw it. And you have to look back on how it gets referred and all. So, we put in the regulation that you can, if you go from Title V to IA technology, you can get 1 extra bedroom above the 1 bedroom per 10,000 square foot of lot space, which is what's in the regulations. And I'd say the main two real pushback situations we've had are in 2-bedroom homes on less than 20,000 square feet, and these people would like to have gone to 3 bedrooms, and they've kind of been caught in things and now they can't do it. Those are the two that we really have. And I would say that this is passed in July, beginning of July, so it's the first few months. There was a request for a variance on that 2-bedroom home, and the board just didn't feel like we were going to set a new preference right at this time. So I'll just entertain other thoughts and comments. Dick Edwards?
Yeah, can I just make one additional comment? The rules, the Title V regulations allow 1 bedroom, 110 gallons per day of sewage flow per 10,000 square feet. So theoretically, a 15,000 square foot house in Chatham would only be allowed 1 bedroom. And the town has allowed virtually any house on a building lot in Chatham to have 2 bedrooms. So we now have many, many houses on 12, 14, 15,000 square feet that already exceed the Title V requirement of 100 gallons per 10,000 square feet and have two bedrooms on that size lot. and are now asking for a third bedroom. So that's where the problem has occurred on several occasions that people have asked, well, we have two bedrooms is a very small house. We would really like to have a third bedroom, but 2 bedrooms is already exceeding the Title V requirement of 110 gallons per 10,000 square feet. And we were asked, well, gee, can't you make an exception for small houses, 2 bedrooms? And we've felt that we would not be comfortable doing that, because if you make an exception for 2 bedrooms, then the next thing is going to be somebody who's going to have 3 bedrooms and say, well, 3 bedrooms isn't very big. Why don't you put a 4th bedroom on a 20,000 square foot lot? So that's where we are at this point.
Okay, other comments from board members in a preliminary? Okay, and then I guess questions from board members or issues or things. There may be things you've heard about, problems, questions. You want to go ahead? Issues that we haven't heard about, or complaints that we haven't heard about, because we didn't really get any information forwarded to us. But I guess that would be the next step.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Noble, and thank you for being here tonight, this evening, for this discussion, or this hearing, I should say. Really appreciate it. I sort of get the approach on the 4 and 5 and 6 bedroom deals, but I struggle with the 2 bedroom deal. I'm a small family, mother and father, and 2 kids. 2 bedrooms doesn't cut it. So, 3 bedrooms kind of does. So I struggle a bit with the logic of saying, and this is a recent case that I happened to become aware of, a hearing, I think it was on the 6th, where you said no to a 2 bedroom, going to 3 for an IA, when in fact the IA delivers less nitrogen to the ground than a 2 bedroom home with a Title V. So it'd be an upgrade to the environment, if you will, if you allowed even a 3rd bedroom with an IA. It'd be better for the environment. There'd be less nitrogen loading. So it is the 2 bedroom deal for me, from my limited understanding of the more recent. Well, I did watch the hearing that you guys had. You said no to that request for a 3rd bedroom, and I just thought in my heart of hearts that it was unfair, that it was a reasonable request, that 3rd bedroom isn't going to overwhelm the town with short-term rentals. Hopefully it's for a family, and also the folks that bought that may have purchased that with the understanding that in fact they probably will be able to add a 3rd bedroom absent this reg that became law and became the regulation, I should say, on August 1st. So I just, as a taxpayer or resident, select board member, whatever, liaison to the Board of Health, I was like, wait a second, you guys have done such a stupendous job over the last 3 or 4 years since COVID struck. I mean, stupendous job, that I was just scratching my head a little bit. And, being very frank, that case in particular just kind of bothered me. So anyway, and I've heard there have been fussings and grumblings amongst the townsfolks that have raised the issue. So that's,
Well,
so it was the 2 bedroom deal for me. I just didn't think that was fair. Anyway.
Just to reply to that, again, the issue is, how do you distinguish between a family asking for a 3rd bedroom and a family asking for a 4th bedroom? That will become an issue. The other problem is, this isn't just about nitrogen. This is about water. This is about the cost of housing. We talk about wanting to have affordable housing for working people. When you allow additional bedrooms, the price of the house goes up, and the likelihood of the house becoming a short-term rental goes up. When a house becomes a short-term rental, the occupancy goes from, on average, in a 2-bedroom house, 1 or 2 people for a year, to, in a 2-bedroom house, 6 people in the house continuously, right now, from early May until November. I live on Meadowbrook Road. We have a family from New Jersey in a rental that just moved in last week, November 8th, in a 3-bedroom house that was occupied by 2 people for 40 years. and over the last 3 years is now occupied by 8 people continuously for 26 weeks. Now, that's putting a big strain on the water supply. It's putting additional nitrogen into the ground, even if you do have an IA system compared to a traditional home. And all of these things are a problem. So we were reluctant to make small houses bigger houses for those reasons. And last year, we had low waterfall, and we had almost a catastrophe in the water system because of the combination of low water, inadequate storage, inadequate pumping, and 2 wells going down from PFAS. If that happened next year with the number of people who are here this year, we'd be in big, big trouble. So I think this plan, although it's based on nitrogen loading, is designed to affect other serious issues in the town.
Yeah, but the 2-bedroom house wasn't on our mind. We were thinking more of the big houses that were getting bigger, that were way over. And those are the ones that were brought up to us before. I think the thinking of the board was, it's early after this. We don't want to set a whole new precedent right away before we sort of get all the feedback and really see where we are. So we didn't want to pass something at that time. I think I said that it's possible to be part of a discussion later on when we sort of evaluate things, because it's always an ongoing thing. Our problem was if we give a preference to a 2-bedroom, then the 3-bedroom people will come, and then the 4-bedroom people, and you get the argument that way. But my own feeling is it possible to have a discussion around what you can do about these 2-bedroom houses as an isolated thing, and put some controls on it in terms of short-term rentals or this or that or whatever. I mean, I think there's, as I say, a discussion about that.
I think that discussion would be appreciated, to be honest with you.
And I think there's other things to think about in terms of these problems is, and Judy has brought it up several times at our meetings, is the ADUs. Basically, no ADUs have been built. To me, the main reason they aren't built is because they have to comply to the Title V septic rules. And people aren't going to put in IA technology to get 1 more bedroom, pay that money for an ADU. They don't do it. So Judy has brought it up, and I mean, maybe it's also a discussion, is there some carve-out you can do that would not harm the nitrogen loading in the town as a whole too much, but would allow some more ADUs to get built? I mean, everything is a compromise. It's not just black and white. So that has come up as well. And so
the gentleman who was at the last Board of Health meeting even volunteered that he would conceivably be willing to put a deed restriction to prevent that house from being converted to a short-term rental. I don't know whether we can actually do that. We'd have to talk to the attorney, I think, about those kinds of deed restrictions. But that could be a possibility.
But I think when we move in this direction, I cite the example, and it's from memory, so Old Village, less than 20,000 square foot, a house that already has 4 or 5 bedrooms grandfathered, and they come and switch to IA, and we grant 1 more bedroom, and that just was too much to us. I'd also say, just as perspective, so if you go from a 3-bedroom Title V, and you put in IA for 4 bedrooms, the nitrogen reduction, the nitrogen loading in the ground doesn't go away. I've been told that it would be about 25% less. So a 3-bedroom Title V, four-bedroom IA, 25% reduction in nitrogen. So it's an improvement, it's good, but it's not, like there's no nitrogen loading either, so there's.
And if that turns into a short-term rental for 26 weeks, the total amount of nitrogen going into the water, into the groundwater, is much greater with an IA system and 4 bedrooms than with a standard system with 3 bedrooms only occupied by a standard sized family, or with maybe some relatives coming for a couple of weeks. Because, some of these houses are insane. There's a house on Barcliff Avenue that was built way back and is on about 18,000 square feet and had 5 bedrooms increased to 6 bedrooms and is advertised as 8 bedrooms, sleeps 20, and occupied for 25 weeks. And the neighbors have been calling, 2 years ago, were calling the Board of Health regularly complaining about the wild parties and all the cars parked on the front lawn. So, this expansion of the size of houses does create problems with the quality of life in Chatham.
So Mr. Nicastro has a comment. I'm going to offer the board the opportunity to comment, and then I have some comments I'll reserve. I want to offer the public a chance to comment as well, but go ahead, Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Hanson and Dr. Edwards. Just a couple of questions. The additional sentence that Judy, this is to you actually, that's in 6.3. So that's on its face, a prohibition against the additional bedroom in those circumstances. So do I understand that the way this works is that there can be a variance from that prohibition? Is that what we're talking about here?
The Board of Health can issue a variance from any of these regulations if the majority of the members of the Board of Health feel it's warranted.
Okay. And I just wanted to ask the summary page is a long description of what went on. Was that prepared by you, Judy?
The summary of the the.
Starts recently, the town of Chatham has seen a study.
No, that's.
Yes.
That's my proposal.
Oh, yes.
Sorry?
I initially made that proposal.
Okay, I just wondered where it came from.
In May.
That was
That's got the whole
kind of.
discussion going.
Yeah, that was what we started the discussion with.
Okay.
Dr. Edwards' request.
And I appreciate what you said in terms of the response to your public hearing, where only one person actually offered any comment, which is interesting. And I don't have any position on this, and I guess I start out with great deference to the Board of Health, and I'm glad somebody's looking at these issues. And we've talked about it a little bit, but perhaps not enough at the Select Board about the impact of additional housing and larger housing. We referred a matter to the Planning Board about size of housing, massing of housing. That's not really your area. Yours is health and the quality of the environment and so forth. I wanted to ask whether the language and the change that you proposed had been reviewed with town council? You did?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, it would.
Town council did review it. And all of these things were reviewed by Dr. Duncanson as well, and he was in full agreement with this.
And I confess, I've had no calls or communications until today, when one person called me, and we may hear from that individual tonight, and raised the point that I think Jeff had made earlier, that in some of these examples, and I don't want to talk about specific cases before your board, the IA system produces less nitrogen loading with the additional bedroom than the house produces without it, without that additional bedroom, without the IA system. But I understand what Dr. Edwards was saying, that if that house is turned over to a large number of people, over a 26-week period, you're going to have considerably more loading. So I just wanted to, have some comfort that your regulation is legally defensible and scientifically based. And that's, it doesn't sound, and I'm not saying it wasn't, it doesn't sound like from the record that anybody offered any data per se, but maybe you all looked at it, and I was just wondering what was being, if you had taken a look at that sort of information about what the comparative impacts were if you had IA. And I understand exactly what you're saying when you get into additional bedroom on a four-family house.
Numbers townwide with one thing over the other?
Well, yeah, did you look at the comparative impact on nitrogen loading of an IA system with the additional bedroom versus not doing anything, not adding a bedroom and relying on the Title V system?
Well, we know that. We know the IA system makes slightly less nitrogen, puts slightly less nitrogen into the groundwater with, say, 4 bedrooms than a Title V with 3 bedrooms, slightly less, if they're occupied for the same length of time by the same number of people.
Okay. All right.
Dr. Edwards made a good point that Dr. Duncanson sat in with all the meetings we had on this issue, and he was very involved, and he had a couple of extra things he threw in when we did the public hearing, housekeeping items. But he basically, if my memory is, he guided us through it. He was behind it. He never mentioned one word of caution. And I mean, he has historical perspective. He goes back to 2005 and 6 when these things were put in place. Mm-hmm. So we relied on him pretty heavily for advice and sort of guidance with the town issues and all.
Yes, and also I know that he and Judy worked really well together on this as well, so.
Okay. I appreciate that. Go ahead. Yes, Doctor.
Oh, no.
No, I just really wanted to get a better understanding of what, you all went through, because I didn't attend your hearings, and I haven't watched them. I only know what I read in the newspapers and what I heard today. So, and I know you're an incredibly deliberative body, and you have probably more power than any other board in this town, including the Select Board. And it's broadly upheld when it's challenged legally. So I just wanted to get a sense of what you did, how you did it, and does it have a sound scientific and legal basis?
I might just say one other thing before we get Mr. Schell's comes here. This is for you all. When you hook up to the sewer, town sewer, you also may be granted 1 extra bedroom, and that goes through the chief of the DPW and through the water and sewer commissioners who were the select board. Judy reviews those. And if you go back to the sewer regulations, which were written back in 2005 or 6 or something, there's a paragraph here. I don't know why I know all this stuff. Article 2, Section 4, Paragraph A, and it says, consistent with the Board of Health interim nitrogen loading regulation revised, which allows for the possible addition of 1 bedroom. 1 additional bedroom may be allowed in a single-family property connected to the sewer. So that regulation appears to me, and I'm no expert here, that it kind of mirrored the Board of Health rule on the additional bedroom variances. So now we have modified our rule somewhat. So to me, the question would be for the sewer and water commissioners, would there be an appropriate examination or possible tweaking of that rule of 1 extra bedroom when you hook up to the sewer? Because just think of some of these streets when the sewer goes down and everyone gets an extra bedroom. I mean, it's just a thought that I have. So I just threw that comment in there.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and the work that you do is, yes, very important to the community. I don't pretend to understand much about nitrogen loading. It's not science is not my biggest deal. But what I am looking at is, how equitable this is for, the community and your flexibility around granting variances in circumstances. And and so what I'm understanding and hearing from you is that you didn't want to start granting, variances or taking special consideration, I guess, on a smaller house because it was too soon. And so I was just wondering, are you revisiting that as a probability, or are you waiting for more comment and allowing more flexibility in that for smaller bedroom homes?
Well, I think that, like I said, we're careful about, the board as a whole is careful about setting a precedent, but.
Turn on your.
Oh, the board is careful about setting a precedent quickly, but I think when we do anything, we get feedback, we get plenty of feedback, and we're open to adjusting or changing things. That's one thing about a regulation, is that you can relatively easily change them. We went that way with the short-term rental regulation. So I guess the answer to the question is yes. We don't have a timeline. We're getting more all the time, and we're getting some tonight too, so that's good.
I was just going to add to that after the hearing last week, when we denied that case, we did decide, knowing we were coming tonight to this meeting, that we would put it on the agenda for our next meeting to further discuss it and based on your feedback, and perhaps discuss how we could make changes if the board is amenable to that.
Yeah.
And we might want to get more information from town council, for example, regarding whether we could require a deed covenant preventing the house from being used as a short-term rental if an additional bedroom is added. Because there's no way to know. We don't even know how many short-term rentals there are in town right now yet. But over the last 18 months, the number of requests for additional bedrooms went through the ceiling. And at the same time, the number of short-term rentals in town has been going up dramatically, where we now have, 25 or 30% of all the properties in town are short-term rentals. And some of the neighborhoods are almost unlivable during the summer season. So if we could make a requirement that a house granted a third bedroom couldn't be immediately converted into a short-term rental, that would make us feel more inclined to make an exception for that kind of a variance.
Well, I appreciate your concern for the short-term rental issue that we have in town, and a lot of other Cape towns are dealing with the same thing, and it is shortening our housing inventory for the people that live here. Understandably, I just look at providing opportunity for ADUs and providing opportunities for people that own small houses and want to expand because their family's expanding. As Jeff had said, it would concern me that we're not moving in the right direction when it comes to supporting local community. So I guess finding that balance is kind of all of our jobs. But I look forward to hearing comments from the audience and further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I will put my thoughts out here for your consideration. Like Shireen, I'm new to all of this, and including this. As I understood what was going on, and I understood your explanation, Dr. Hanson, was consistent with what I understood had gone on here, which was that prior to the change in the regulation, there had been a requirement for a variance, and I think I heard you say that even with the change in the regulation, you have the power to grant the variance that is on the express terms of the variance prohibited. And if that's incorrect, I'll let you correct me. But my first area of concern is that the primary, if not the exclusive, focus of this regulation is nitrogen loading. And as I understand it, it seems to be a pretty much generally accepted fact that the IA technology reduces nitrogen loading even with an additional bedroom. Now, that's not an argument that everybody's entitled to an additional bedroom, but from my perspective, if that's the primary focus, that ought to carry some weight. A related point, we've heard a lot about short-term rentals, and that obviously is a serious problem, not only here, but all across the Cape. I don't know what percentage of the houses in Chatham are short-term rentals. I know a bunch of them are left unoccupied for many months of the year, and there's a large number of them that are short-term rentals as well. But we have a short-term rental regulation, which you enacted, and so to some extent, my uneducated and untutored view of the world would be let the short-term rental regulation deal with short-term rentals and let the nitrogen loading regulation deal with the nitrogen issue. My second issue, and I'm just going to get them all out so that you've got them all in front of you, is a little bit what you've heard from my colleagues, but it's what I call the reliance equity interest. That is, people who have either bought a house in reliance on the way things used to be, or who have owned one and have a plan to do something based on the way things that used to be. And so from my perspective, I have no quarrel with either your power or indeed even your wisdom in enacting the regulation. But from my perspective, for those people, and by the way, I did see the November 6th hearing, that kind of came through to me that here's somebody who kind of got caught in the middle. I would ask the question why there couldn't have been a little bit more extended notice period, so people who have hired somebody or who've just bought a house and have a plan to go forward, which, by the way, is not, as I think I understand it, of right. It's just under a different approach to the discretion with which you grant variances. Give them 6 months or 8 months or even a year to come to you and before the regulation is effective. So that was my second concern. And then, frankly, with respect to the notice, and maybe I'm misreading it somehow, but your materials that you presented us with showed that the public hearing was advertised on the 6th and the 13th of July. The statutory requirement is 14 days. I don't think your notice, unless I missed a notice somewhere else, qualified. So I'd be curious to know if I'm missing something there. So I'll stop there.
The notice dates, I think Judy is. Yeah, the notice dates, I'd have to review that. I think it was our normal process, and we kind of rely on Judy to do all, and Diane to do all the advertising. And
Yeah, I mean, the first notice would have been enough. We do always advertise twice in a local paper.
Just to be very precise, the first notice was July 6th. Statute, which I think is Chapter 111, Section 31, says 14 days. From January 6th to from July 6th to July 17th is not 14 days.
I'll have to look on that and discuss it.
Yeah,
I'd have to check the dates and the regulation.
We usually rely on, in a standard way, so we can check that. Other questions or comments?
And my first two questions were, one, using the regulation on nitrogen loading to regulate nitrogen, and the short-term rental regulation to regulate short-term rentals. I mean,
I think
all due respect to your
Yeah.
power,
Yeah.
and if Dean's right, I would say that that's amazing. That sort of power should be used judiciously, but the focus of this regulation that we're talking about is nitrogen loading. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, it's equity. And I'm not talking about all the people, I'm talking about individuals for whom it is perhaps inequitable to drop a regulation on them in the midst of planning or development of something. And particularly, I would argue there are always ways to distinguish big cases from little cases. Forgive me, I'm a lawyer. You can always distinguish something. And the two-bedroom small house that has historical strength in Chatham is one for which I would work very hard to be accommodating. That's really what I'm saying, on both a reliance and an equitable basis.
Can I just point out that the houses we're talking about already exceed the nitrogen loading regulations? So, you're sort of splitting hairs, but if a house has 3 bedrooms on 20,000 square feet, it is exceeding the nitrogen loading regulations. They want to add another bedroom, and the argument is, well, we won't be any worse with the IA system. But the board, has the power to say, no, we would prefer you not have another bedroom, have more people in the house, and since you're already exceeding the nitrogen loading regulations. It's not that they're fully in compliance and they want to add an IA system in another bedroom. They're not in compliance. They're already exceeding the nitrogen loading limits.
And if I might, Mike.
Because of
I
grandfather.
don't mean to interrupt, but I just really want to check the science on that one, and especially on the 2-bedroom, adding another bedroom and having an IA system. I'm certain that the nitrogen loading is less if you have 3 bedrooms and an IA versus a 2-bedroom and a Title V.
You're absolutely right, as long as the occupancy is the same and the duration of occupancy is the same.
And then I would also like to see the science on the 3 and the 3 to the 4. Not that I'm advocating that everybody has a 3-bedroom house ought to be able to add a 4th and blah, blah, blah. But I'd like to know the science on it. And what Mr. Shell stated resonates with me. I mean, we don't want to, just want to be careful we're not legislating or regulating areas where others turf or others ought to be. You guys have already passed an excellent short-term rental regulation that is still nascent in its being, that will yet to be tested as well, and hopefully we'll be able to go back and modify that should it not prove to be manageable and logical, et cetera. And one would hope that we could do the same with the approach here on variances. It says you may grant a variance, and you didn't, and you're hearing folks react to that decision. And I think you're smart and mature enough to understand that there's some feedback coming your way that is negative. And that's no disparagement whatsoever. You guys, I think, have a tremendously difficult job. But with respect to nitrogen loading, it's a fairly narrow focus. So anyway. And I'm not an expert, and I would like to see the science on the 3rd to the 4th. And I'm not talking about 4 and 5 bedrooms wanting to add a 6th or whatever. I get it. And we do have concerns about the number of short-term rentals in town, but we also have concerns about allowing folks to develop property that's manageable and usable for their family. That's where I come down. Thanks.
And you're getting back to the 2-bedroom.
I am, thanks.
Well, in answer generally, I'd say we took a sort of a broader view than just nitrogen loading. We took water, we have droughts and emergency things every summer. Quality of life in the neighborhood, which I think we kind of felt was in our purview. So we had kind of a broader view than just the nitrogen number. And people were caught, whenever something's new, it's a crossover, that's right. Now, we did have some people that put in for their variance right before the new regulation took in effect, and then got a continuance, so it wasn't solved until a month or two later, but we grandfathered them back to beforehand, because that's when they put in their variance request. So we did have some of those. But your argument is that we could have done more. I understand.
Yeah, I just, when you say more, transition rules for something that is regulating a process that is not a 2-week process. I mean, it's a 6-month process. I'm talking about the planning and the retention of experts and the development of applications.
You mean like architect, engineer?
Yeah, exactly. And development of permits and so forth. That really on a fast track is probably at least 6 months. That's what I'm talking about. But I'm sorry, Dean, you were going to.
I just wanted to offer one comment, and I understand, I think the board understands the distinction between the subject matter of this regulation, which is nitrogen loading, and I know you have other considerations which are legitimate health considerations that Dr. Hansen just articulated. I do think, and this is something I would defer to town council on, the concept of a deed restriction that Dr. Edwards mentioned is something worth exploring. And I think that my sense is that would be particularly germane to nitrogen loading, because you're talking about the impact of having multiple additional persons in the house. So, and I appreciate your willingness to examine this regulation going forward as you work with it. And so I just really wanted to offer that comment. And I think your interest in having legal review of this is admirable. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I think carving out the smaller house with some protections, that was brought up. We held it out as something that we would discuss and think about with some time. So I think we agree with trying to look at it.
Yeah, I continue to have a bit of a problem with that. If you have a bigger house that's on a bigger lot, to say we won't give them another bedroom, but we'll allow a 2-bedroom house on a 15,000 square foot lot to have another bedroom. I think, that it's not really fair to tell somebody that has a 25,000 square foot lot that has 3 bedrooms that they can't have a 4th bedroom, and when 2 bedrooms can have a 3rd bedroom. But I can see a way where if you could prevent that house from becoming a short-term rental with 6 bedrooms, that would be beneficial to the town. So, if we're thinking of doing something, I have a little bit of a problem saying a 2-bedroom is a special case, and we need to consider that totally separate from a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom. I think we need to be consistent in what we do, and I would be perfectly happy to consider the possibility of deed restrictions to prevent, because a lot of the variances we're getting, they're not for 2-bedroom houses, they're for 4-bedroom houses that want a 5th bedroom. And then when you look at the architect plan, there's also a library and a sunroom and a playroom with a bath on the playroom. It seems fairly clear that many of these are going to be heavily occupied. And that's the kind of thing that we would like to prevent.
I don't see anybody here that wants to say. Ms. Gordon, did you say you wanted?
I was just going to say, I think it's fair to say that this conversation will probably be continued at future Board of Health meetings, and with all the valuable feedback we got tonight, it would be very helpful. We'll continue our conversations.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the public that Mr. Riley?
I would just say before, if there's any information you have or recommendation or thoughts, I mean, if you kind of give it to us, that helps us.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Bill Riley. And I was here when they introduced the nitrogen loading regulation. And to Mr. Shell's point, it took several years of study with the embayment projects and test wells measuring nitrogen loading before the regulation was imposed. And the Board of Health at that time took into consideration the fact that the town had been developed over a series of generations, and many of the lots were, for many, many years, our minimum lot size was 10,000 square feet. And so we have a lot of houses, or we did have a lot of houses on 10,000 square foot lots with 2 bedrooms. And the genius of the nitrogen loading regulation as was implemented at that time was the introduction of the IA technology. And so the fact that we were introducing less nitrogen into the groundwater, even though we had an additional bedroom, was seen as a plus. And so the Board of Health at that time said that if you want a variance and you're not in a nitrogen sensitive area, we'll give you a variance. And so so they protected the property owners in 2 different ways. One was a lengthy study period. There was a great deal of newspaper articles about it. I guess I somehow missed your July 6th notice. I can't imagine what I was doing, why I wasn't looking at the legal ads on July 6th, but I think it's just one of those things, just slipped by me. But, as I say, so there was a lot of notice and there was a lot of advertising. And so the public embraced the nitrogen loading regulation at that time. And so, with all due respect to the board members, it seems to me that you based, your decision on anecdotal stories. Dr. Richards has a neighbor with 6 bedrooms and they rent it short-term. 35% of the homes are short-term rentals. Where do these numbers come from? There's no science behind your regulation. It was rushed through, ill thought out, and it cost a lot of people a lot of money, which Dr. Richard already noticed. Well, now they won't be selling them for as much money. So my partner was representing someone purchasing a property for $1 million on Eldridge Square. And the regulation went into effect, and he walked away from the deal. So that property owner now has a significantly devalued property. I mean, in the viewpoint of some members, apparently, clearly the guy was only buying it so he could have short-term rentals. The reality is, as I drive around town in the summertime, it's rare to see a parking lot or driveway maxed out on a weekend. There'll be extra cars, sure, but maxed out, so it's like the end of the universe. That rarely happens. And the suggestion that somehow denying the IA variance is going to help us out. 3-bedroom homes, they go to short-term rentals too. But more nitrogen is going into the ground because of your decision not to allow these variances. You say, well, but if they do it for 26 weeks, there's got to be more nitrogen going in. How do you know? You don't. And the other fact about that is, what happens to the house for the other 26 weeks? Nothing. And so the total nitrogen going into the groundwater is no more. In fact, it would be less if you allowed the variance. And so I would suggest you suspend this regulation, do some study, like you did when you were in medical school, and have some science applied to this thing, rather than, I think this is bad, I think that's bad. Well, if I think it's bad, it must be bad. So let's make a decision that devalues every 2-bedroom house in this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Litchfield?
Good evening, Bill Litchfield, here on behalf of one of the parties who got kind of caught in a time warp, Rich Tepper, who bought a house on a 16,000 square foot lot with 2 bedrooms, and did so based on 2 decades of experience in which an IA system allowed for a 3rd bedroom. I am very much encouraged by the comments from both boards this evening. We know that the science is clear that an IA system for 3-bedroom produces less nitrogen than the standard 2-bedroom system, 20 to 25% less. The science is clear that an IA system, Ms. Davis and I have the same science teacher, which is why neither of us are science experts, but I've been told by people that those numbers are correct. As I said, I'm very much encouraged that the board is going to reconsider revisiting these regulations, because the state changed the rules too. And in July, they became effective. And our regulations as amended say that you can have a 2-bedroom system on any vacant lot except in a nitrogen-sensitive area. As a result of the changes in CMR, the entire town of Chatham, except for a very narrow strip along Red River in South Chatham, is a nitrogen-sensitive regulation. I don't know, Judy, whether that was considered when the changes were made, but all of the town is now a nitrogen-sensitive area. And it also, your regs as amended say, if in a nitrogen-sensitive area, but again, all of the town is essentially in an MSA. So I think if you revisit that with an eye toward the equity of timing that Mr. Shell and other members mentioned, it would be appropriate. And I think in terms of discriminating in regard to 2-bedroom systems, you can. You already have a provision which gives special status to one's ability to build a 2-bedroom house on a vacant lot. And I think there clearly is a difference between going from 2 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms as opposed to 5 to 6 or 7. So I thank both boards for their time, and I'm sure that your next meeting, the Board of Health's next meeting to consider this, will be posted. Mr. Riley and I will both be paying attention, and we look forward to meeting with you and discussing it further. And we thank you.
Thank you. We have Ms. Gibbs online, who is seeking to be recognized. Ms. Gibbs?
Yes, thank you. I have been attending the Board of Health meetings for a long time now, and have watched the Board of Health take on some very significant issues. I think we all recognize for at least the last 3 years since PFAS were discovered, and the drought that we've been going through, that we have a serious water and sewer problem in Chatham. And we also are looking to increase density throughout the town for affordable housing. And we also have a short-term rental problem. One of the previous speakers said there's no data on how many rental properties there are. The Board of Health has that information. People have to register. There are a minimum of 1,700. They believe there are close to 2,000 homes in Chatham that are rental properties. That is significant. And they are non-resident. A lot of them are businesses. And they do rent out for upwards of 26 weeks with lots and lots of people in them. I happen to live in an area where I am literally the only full-time resident. Every other home around me are summer rentals. Having said that, I think that we all talk about the concerns we have about water and sewer, but we're not willing to address it, and the Board of Health has. And they, I think, have been very diligent over these past months. And Dr. Duncanson was involved in all of the decisions. He helped write this. He felt it was solid. Town council was involved. Now, if you think that more time should be given and it's related to 1 or 2 bedrooms, you know, obviously, I guess the Board of Health could do that. But I would urge you to understand the amount of time and effort they put into this, and they're the only ones willing to tackle this issue right now as it relates to our lack of capacity of water and quality of water, and in the event that we have PFAS show up and we lose more wells that are going to be down for 3 years. So I just would like you to, I hope this isn't a developer's issue rather than quality of life and water resource and sewer capacity, because that's what's important moving forward for the town in terms of public health and safety. And I think the Board of Health has done a lot of great work, and I think they should be commended for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Is it Mr. Clark?
Yes. David Clark. So there's a lot of discussion on water quality. This is a water quality issue, but the Board of Health is ignoring it. As Attorney Litchfield said, for 20 years, the Board of Health has been diligent to improve water quality in this town. By removing the ability to add a bedroom by using IA technology is a detriment to water quality in the town of Chatham. The numbers are crystal clear. And it's not just the last 20 years. Chatham's was the first town on Cape Cod to have a nitrogen loading regulation, and it actually goes back almost 30 years. At that time, the town had a consultant, Wright Pierce, out of Thompson, Maine. Mike Giggy spent numerous time, almost a decade with the Board of Health to craft the first nitrogen loading regulation, and then revised the regulation in the early 2000s. The primary reason for and I was here, I've been doing this for 30 years. The primary reason for the revision in the early 2000s was IA Technologies. A numerous number of vendors came online and got state approval for systems that remove nitrogen. And the Board of Health at that time was not granting additional bedrooms. And primarily because it was a political issue. They were circumventing town meeting and the town bylaw to regulate growth. And so the Board of Health finally saw the numbers, and for almost 20 years, we went through the process of adding bedrooms. You talked about water use. I believe our town charter puts the management of our water system and our water resources with the Select Board. The Select Board are the water commissioners. To talk about density, size of houses, parking, those are all zoning issues. They should be dealt with at town meeting, not a three-person majority of a board. That's serious implications on the citizens of Chatham, that 3 people can decide issues that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for some property owners. So I said this at the meeting last Monday, that it's a political issue. It's not a water quality issue, because they have 20 years of nitrogen calculations from almost 50 applications that my office has filed with them, all showing in every single instance that by adding a bedroom, you reduce the amount of nitrogen going into groundwater. Plain and simple. That's the science of it. Everything else that the board members spoke of tonight are all political issues that should be dealt with at town meeting. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah, you can.
Hi, Mark Sangiolo, architect, Harwich, Mass. Thank you for having this meeting. I think it's really great that getting all these issues out. My client got caught in this block with the timing of this thing, and it seems very unfair. Go to look at the lot before he purchased it. Well, go to meet with the building commissioner. What can we do? Board of Health, doesn't look like a problem. You can add another bedroom. It's a two-bedroom. You can add another bedroom. Meet with the Conservation Commission. That's really not that hard a stumbling block. You just try to make it better, do some mitigation. Zoning Board of Appeals, make sure it blends into the neighborhood. So what happened was then he purchases the property. Then 5 months later, the Board of Health changes their regulation. Now it's only a two-bedroom. So I don't know what he had on the table, maybe $250,000. That's the difference between a two-bedroom and a three-bedroom with the worth of the land. So that's a real problem. And the Board of Health said, well, we have a variance in our mechanism in our guidelines. Sounds reasonable, but you get in front of them, and this seems like this would be the gold star candidate for a variance since you got caught in the middle of this thing. No, there's no variance here. And then you hear the engineers saying that it's a better system. There should be, actually an incentive. This is what incentivize trying to do a better system that's better for the environment. So that's a real problem. You should, when you enact these regulations, it should be like a year, I think, because it's a long time. These processes take so long now. I have no problem with regulations, and but I have to work in a system. I can't just have these things dropping like bombs around me. No one can do that. So it seems like there's some ideological stuff going on, but that's what they're doing. They're trying to understand what they're doing. It's very important. Obviously, the Board of Health is very important. So, and the whole issue of affordable housing, the short-term rental, that seems like really a broader issue that needs a lot of input from a lot of the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Health, all kinds of different things before. You can't just use this as one mechanism. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Before you leave, I wanted to ask this question for quite a while, and you're here, so I'll ask you. Ballpark, if we're going to 2 to 3 bedrooms, what does it cost to install the IA technology?
I couldn't tell you what the actual systems cost. That's not my expertise, so I wouldn't.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
David Clark again. Oh, is it on? Yeah. A typical, just the IA component is somewhere between $7,000 and $9,000.
I'm sorry, 7 and 9?
Between $7,000 and $9,000.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm Richard Tepper. I own the property at 28 Cranberry. It actually is behind my house at 517 Stony Hill. I came to the Board of Health meeting. I was shocked at how many times short-term rental came up. I have I just have no indication of doing that at all. It's actually for my in-laws. They live in Florida. I can't have them live with me, so I'd rather build a house and have them stay there. So that's what it's for. And I'll be quite honest with you. I was a little offended in how I was treated. One of the members was looking at the plan and said this could be a 5-bedroom. It's a 3-bedroom. It's a family home. It's a generational home. I plan on keeping it forever and going from a 2 to 3-bedroom. And I appreciate your support on the Board of Selectmen. I really felt that I had nothing to stand on when I left that meeting on the Board of Health, and I think you've opened up a lot of eyes, and very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'd like to just take a shot at responding to your invitation, Dr. Hanson, to say I think the one thing just off the top of my head that I would encourage you and the board to try to do is to gather up, reach out, get from whatever sources are reliable, good data. And I'm not only talking about science. That apparently is reasonably well established. What I'm really talking about is good data. I agree that numbers tend to get thrown around that we've heard that sound reasonable, but I'm talking about all of the components that help to influence and/or actually drive your considerations, that you can point to good sources of data that say this is what we have found and this is what we're relying on in reaching our determination that we should regulate as follows. That would be my one suggestion, if you will.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. I would say one thing, I'm not going to get into all the little things, but I think in our mind, and I think the input we got, that we were more going back to what we thought was the original intent, the 1 bedroom per 10,000 square foot, what is written. The idea of the grandfathered 4-bedroom or 5-bedroom on the small lot, that grandfather thing was never in there anywhere. So I wasn't around when the regulations were made. Bob Duncanson was, though, and we did have input from him. But I think it's, we've talked about, we've heard what you've said, and I think it'll be a discussion that we have, and we take input in all the time. I would say, and I'm sorry if the individual felt like he was treated badly by the board. In my mind, I don't think he was. I think looking at the plan and saying this is a 5-bedroom, what you have to understand is we count bedrooms, and then you get into this arcane thing of what is a bedroom. Does it have privacy? Does it have egress? Does it have windows? Does it have a doorway, archways, and so forth? And there's a lot of things. So in these newer home plans, they have multiple amorphous rooms. They have a den, they have an office, they have a workspace, they have an upstairs family room. We've seen one with a sewing room. And we look at it, and what we have to say is this actually a bedroom? It's not just what the architect writes on it. Is this a bedroom? So that's where it comes up. This looks like a 5-bedroom house, because we're going back to these little rules about what is a bedroom. It wasn't meant in any other way. So I would just say that in conclusion. But for us, it's good input. It's an ongoing, as I say, conversation. And
thank you. Dean, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to close by saying that, the Board of Health is a regulatory body when it comes to reviewing applications for variances, and I think it's very important for the Select Board to understand it's not our role to intervene in their cases, in their particular cases. And I think we do understand that. And I do appreciate the input that we received from the public, both in the room here and online. And I come away encouraged because I have the clear impression that the Board of Health views this as an ongoing matter for examination. And I think in that spirit, this has been a productive session. But I do want to make very clear, I don't think it's appropriate for the Select Board to be weighing in on particular cases. Thank you.
Yes, sir, Dr. Edwards.
I'd just like to make one additional point. Individually, I would welcome people who feel they have been abused by this system because they were planning to do something and they just got, this happened so rapidly they couldn't get things done. If they wanted to submit another application with an explanation for why they feel that the timing of this disadvantaged them, the Board of Health may grant a variance. It's not, there's nothing here carved in stone. So if Mr. Tepper came back with, you know, a document saying, look, this was our plan, this is when we bought the house, this is why we want to do it, we have no plans for it to be a short-term rental, whatever, we may be able to grant variances in individual cases. So I think we will have to talk about it as a board, but that's something that I think would be a reasonable.
Yeah, and I think we really appreciate that, and I think the applicant would appreciate it as well, and there is a larger conversation to be had as well. So I hope we do continue the lines of communication and kind of vet this issue, especially the two-bedroom issue going forward more deeply. An excellent point was made this evening about the kind of the notice that went out in terms of the time that the community had to really cogitate and consider on this issue. It seemed to happen kind of suddenly. There was a headline and off we went. So, and then the first kind of variance wasn't granted, so suddenly people's antennae are up, and kind of rightfully so, I think. So I really do appreciate your willingness to be here tonight and listen to everybody, including the folks in the crowd and the select board. And I thank you very much. And I would never try to interfere in individual cases. It's just that that case in particular was brought to some attentions on this board, and it did get my attention. And I do appreciate all your work. You guys have done great work. You really have, and really are appreciated.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, we're a volunteer board. We're not elected. We're not paid. We don't get a stipend. We are honestly trying to do what we think is best for the town. And that's the way we operate through COVID, which was very difficult. And that's the way we worked on the short-term rental regulation, which in the end worked out very well, I think, the whole town getting involved. So I would just say that. But I think what you say.
Yeah, no, you have an excellent track record. Superb. Thank you.
Ms. Boyce, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, I thought I saw you push your, Mr. Clark, yes.
Thank you. I just want to make one more comment. And everybody here, except for Judy and Thad, probably don't realize that, you know, Title V first came out in 1978. And the state promised every 10 years to take a look at it and revise it, and they didn't. And in 1995, there was a wholesale rewriting of Title V, and that's when the state first implemented a nitrogen restriction in areas of contribution to a municipal well. That was such a severe departure from the old Title V that the state grandfathered any one parcel of land held in single ownership, 3 bedrooms for 3 years. So they gave the public 3 years to get their ducks in a row for people that bought a lot that just couldn't afford to build right away and build a 3-bedroom house. So just keep that in mind too, that even the state, as restrictive as Title V is in a water resource area, grandfathered lots for 3 bedrooms for 3 years.
Thank you. Anything else? I think that, I'll just say, I hope you will look carefully at and resolve however, but treat the notice question with whatever significance it deserves.
I definitely will.
Thank you. I think that concludes our
Thank you.
joint meeting. Would you like to close your meeting before we go on to our next thing?
I'll move to close the Board of Health meeting.
And then we can probably take a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Okay, the Board of Health portion is closed.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
So our next agenda item is, I think it's just really setting up the the lines on the field for our goal-setting workshop on December 5. Jill, do you want to go with that?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this was a Select Board agenda request by Select Board Member Nick Castro. And what we provided in the packet was a suggested outline to really drill down to get to some measurable goals and to hopefully limit the number of goals to 5. So this is a suggested, I guess, way of doing this deliberative discussion. Again, with the Select Board, Kathy and I will be present and help facilitate the discussions, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Isn't our goal-setting workshop on the 2nd of December?
Yes, I saw that typo. so
Okay.
That'll be fixed.
Thank you.
Yeah, we wouldn't have had a quorum.
No, it would just been
So
me.
it's Saturday,
Yeah.
December 2nd.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I don't have any questions, thanks.
Anybody else? Dean, are you good?
Yeah, I had asked that this go on because the town manager, when she unveiled this process recently at one of our meetings, indicated this would be a different approach. And, we had just come off the working session on committees, which I found, somewhat less than perfect. So I wanted to, make sure we understood what the ground rules were going forward, as the chair just outlined. So I'm satisfied that, we have this. Are we expected to fill this out now, or is Kathy going to send us some sort of an alert or a reminder of what to do?
We'll send a hard copy and electronic copy as well, and ask if the board members would submit them to our office by November 27th.
Okay.
Give you some time after the holiday.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joe.
It's a take-home exam that is pretty tough. Okay.
Looks good.
We'll move to the appointments item and reappointments. We'll start with the Independence Day Parade Committee. We have 3 seats available. We have interviewed Steve DeBoer, Wendy Upson, and Peter Tulp. And then, I think it was last night, we interviewed Susan Wegner, who expressed a willingness to serve on either committee that she had talked about, but she, I think, had a slight preference in the direction of the Cultural Committee, the Cultural Council. So with that, I will entertain a motion unless somebody wants to make a discussion.
No, can I make a motion?
Please.
I move to appoint Wendy Upson to the Independence Day Parade Committee until June 30th, 2026, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Dykens.
Aye.
And Mr. Shell says aye. Do we hear another motion?
I'll make another one.
Go ahead.
I move to appoint Steve DeBoer to the Independence Day Parade Committee until June 30th, 2026, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
Further discussion? Mr. Dykens.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Dean.
Aye.
And finally, the third one.
I'm not going to make that one.
Mr. Chairman, it's a tough choice, but given the preference that was expressed last night by Ms. Wagner, and
Yeah, if I may, I mean, there was absolutely no discussion about this committee in context of her,
Yeah.
other than a brief mention until I sort of asked her
yeah,
if she'd be willing to serve on both.
And
But
I did
She
sug-
clearly was leaning in the direction.
and I
of
did
cultural.
suggest to her that if she wanted to serve on another committee, she could do the Public Ceremonies Committee, which
Yeah,
is even
yeah.
less demanding than the Independence Day. And I'm
Yep.
sorry for the chief to hear this, but anyway, he'll get 3 appointments. So I'm going to I move to appoint, is it Peter Tulp to the Independence Day Parade Committee until June 30th, 2026, unless sooner revoked or successor is appointed.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And Mr. Shell says aye. I'm going to ask that we defer the Council on Aging Board discussion until 2 weeks hence, after we've heard from that board as well as this board on the subject of increasing the size of that board. The Cultural Council has 2 seats available, for which we have interviewed Susan Wegner and Barry Desilets. I'll accept the motion. Oh, do we, this,
we don't have
I
Barry.
thought we had 2 open seats.
Yeah, there are 2.
This doesn't say that.
There should be 2. We got
Are they-
Corey thought there were 2 last night.
Yeah, I thought there were 2 as well.
There are 2.
Okay,
And are
good.
they both 2026?
They are, and I did also want to note that the Independence Day Parade had 2 for 2026 and 1 for 2024. I was trying to get
we
attention,
got-
but I
Yeah,
believe.
no.
Yeah, we're good there,
We
Cal.
did, yeah, we're good. We're
Well,
good.
no, the last one you did all 3 for 2026.
No,
No, the last one was.
Peter
24.
Tulp was
Peter's
24.
24.
Okay, sorry, I misheard that.
It was? Well, I read it from here, so I think I said 2026.
I believe
Oh,
he said 2026.
I was reading this and I heard.
The first one was listed
24.
as 2024.
Yeah, and it jumped so it,
I jumped the
yeah,
first
she jumped the
You
first
did?
one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So probably we should revote the
Okay.
Peter Tulp one. So-
Peter Tulp, sure.
Yeah, I'll move to reconsider that one and that vote and to appoint Peter Tulp to the Independence Day Parade Committee until June 30th, 2024, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And Mr. Shell says yes. Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I move to appoint Susan Wegner to the Cultural Council until June 30th, 2026, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And Mr. Shell says aye. I'll do this one. I move to appoint Barry Desilets to the Cultural Council until June 30, 2026, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second?
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And so that takes care of that. The Barnstable County Human Rights Advisory Committee?
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, I move to appoint Carolyn McClellan to the Barnstable County Human Rights Advisory Committee until June 30th, 2026, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
Mr. Dykens, how say you?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And Mr. Shell says aye. Community Preservation Committee.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I move to reappoint Alan Mowry as the Chatham Housing Authority representative to the Community Preservation Committee until June 30, 2026, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
Any further discussion? How say you, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye, and Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
We are done.
Mr. Chair, I move to, what do we say? Adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And Mr. Shell says aye.
Good night, Chatham.
I can't believe, good night, Chatham.